Hell yeah.
Um, so I wanted to ask you then what kind of questions you had insofar as purpose is concerned. Like, what do you think about purpose? What do you think it means? Just in general, like you read some of my, oh my goodness, forgot my microphone. You read the book that I'm writing on purpose, and I just want to know what your reaction to that was.
Well, you hit a lot of different topics, and I mean that's kind of what I was saying earlier. Is purpose is very broad. It can mean a number of things, but that's also what makes it interesting because it's like I mean this is a theme that we come back to a lot in everything that we talk about. It's kind of like a multifaceted diamond, and to some people they might just be focused on one or two of those facets, but when you look at all of them, then you kind of get a 3D perspective, and there's a lot more depth and literal, depth as in 3D to it once you look at it from multiple angles. And then some of the definitions I find almost seem like very separate from one another, like purpose in the sense of something more mundane. Like, an example you used was what's the purpose of drinking a glass of water? Well, maybe you just feel thirsty, right? Versus purpose in the sense of like activism, right? Some purpose that is greater than yourself, a cause or something like that. Those might seem like very separate things. And it's valid to see it that way. But also, once you start looking at it from many angles, you start to see the connection between those two seeming disparate things. And you develop a much bigger perspective. And with many of the concepts that we talk about, I feel like that's a theme. Again, the multifaceted diamond. But a question that I wanted to ask you, which this leads into, is kind of if there was one facet, if there was one like elevator pitch, I guess, for purpose that you could think of, an entry point, would there be any that you could think of? A good starting point, yeah.
If there's if there's like one facet of purpose or a starting point to try to understand purpose, or what do you mean exactly?
Mm. Well, because again, it's broad, right? We can agree on that.
Yeah.
So, in terms of when you're trying to present purpose or the specific book on purpose, where would you start if there had to be a starting point? Because like I struggle with that too, with these kinds of concepts. Where do I start in trying to explain what I'm trying to say? Because it's so broad, and by definition, it's something that can't really be reduced to just a sentence or two. But we have to start somewhere, right? Does that make sense to you?
I get it. I think,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So in that case, I would start with the purpose of purpose and the
Mm.
meaning of meaning.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
th- the reason for that is it's tied to definition. I mean, because purpose is such a broad thing, and literally is seems to be the singularity or the sole focus of our entire lives. Like, we live our lives with a purpose, whether we're aware of it or not. You know, I do think that we're aware of it. It's just very background substance thing, and that's what we were talking about. Like this idea that there's a paradox in the obvious. So it's the most obvious thing in the world, but it's that we have a purpose and that we think about purpose and that we move through life with a purpose that we have chosen for ourselves. But it's so obvious that we don't really think about, or we don't think through whether we've chosen the right purpose, whether that purpose is actually meaningful to us, whether, we really are the person that we think we are, because purpose is tied to identity. So I think that, like, the entry point is to first understand purpose and what it is and why we have it as human beings, as opposed to other animals who just live based on pure instinct alone. But we're self aware. We're aware that we can have a decision that it will impact where our lives are going to go and how it's going to roll out. So, purpose is literally everything to us. There's nothing that is more concrete that we can think about uh, to help give us a direction or orient ourselves in life other than purpose. And it's beautiful because it's stripped away from like religion, it's stripped away from any kind of ideological integration that can be superimposed from the top or from some level of authority as you grow up, right? You just sort of grow into these things, not realizing that you're given a purpose, you're given an answer as to what things are. But if you're not given anything, then you are in charge of your own metaphysical investigation of purpose, which basically comes down to understanding what the purpose of purpose is. So why is it that we're around to have a purpose to begin with? And then you've really opened up a huge can of worms because you're basically
Yeah.
asking every single metaphysical question you can ask. You can ask, why is there something rather than nothing? What's the purpose of existence itself? And,
Mhm.
that's where, guys like you and I kind of run amok and figure it out. But for most people, I think the starting point really is so the purpose of purpose is something that I think we can work on to bring people an elucidation and a greater understanding of purpose as it is, as an axiomatic, abstract object that we live with and have to live with. But for most people who go on living their lives and sometimes hit confusion, the entry point isn't the purpose of purpose. For them, is what is my purpose? Right. And what is the purpose of existence? I need to figure those two out for myself so I can move forward in my life and feel good again. So that's the starting point, I would say. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that's
I'm
great.
gonna get my coffee. One sec.
Yeah.
But the you brought up activism, and
Okay.
that's what I wanted to discuss because activism is, I think, the one thing that is robbing people of their purpose, and they're like being hijacked. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm not I have yet
And it's
to
that.
agree. Sorry?
Well, no, go ahead.
I I'm not sure if I agree that it's the one thing, but it's a major thing nowadays, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know
That
if I
gets
said
tricky
it's the
too.
one thing, but if I did,
Yeah,
yeah, I wouldn't. Huh?
number 1. It's a tricky thing to talk about because well, it's hard to talk about without giving examples, specific examples to how certain causes might do that specifically with a person, rob them of purpose, of meaning.
Well, I think that there's two scenarios. I think sometimes people they lose their sense of meaning and then they attach themselves to some cause because they feel they can get a sense of meaning purely by taking up a cause. And
Mhm.
it's very insidious because when you take up a political cause, for example, you're getting various types of meaning that makes you feel fulfilled. For
Yeah.
example, virtue, right? There's a certain level of sense of security that one gets when they are seen as virtuous by the group, because then it marks you or identifies you as a good citizen or a good person,
Mhm.
and that ensures your survival in a literal way. So people feel that there's a sense of meaning in their own survival. One of the abstract ways they do that is to feel and appear virtuous to others.
Tribal.
So political causes certainly gives you, yes, tribalism. That gives you a sense of meaning in that direction, but it also gives you a sense of meaning in terms of community. You're taking part of in something that is larger
Yeah.
than yourself.
Yeah.
So that's another
Belonging.
source of meaning. And so belonging, exactly. So there's all these different things, but the purpose that you're serving in order to achieve that meaning is completely, a lot of the times, disconnected from your actual personal life. Take, for example, the saving the whale, right? Now, you're, let's say, a 22-year-old college student in, you know, Arkansas or something like that. You're nowhere near the ocean, is what I'm trying to say. And what you're doing is you're taking up this cause that has no bearing on, no impact in your personal life. There's nothing about taking up that cause that's going to help you build community in a real sense. Meaning, the people that you surround yourself with that are in your immediate environment, have you built real relations with them on a day-to-day basis? No. And so the purpose is disconnected from the meaning in a way, or the purpose provides you a more the word I'm looking for is ephemeral. It's an ephemeral
Mm.
meaning. It comes in the moment, which is why these activists tend to get more and more radical really quickly, because it's not enough after a while to just put up a poster, right? Or some kind of hashtag on your social media. Then you got to go out to protests. After that, you got to, invest money, and then it's not enough. You need to pull more meaning out of that purpose by making yourself more relevant to that activity, to that cause. And then eventually it collapses, because you become, you can spend 3 4 5 years and you realize, I'm not getting anywhere, I'm not building family, I'm not building friends, I'm not building my own career, and I've wasted a few years for a cause that really has nothing to do with me. And in contrast with the whale example, it might not seem that much irrelevant when it comes to political causes, but it is. Like, you're a college student, you're not, hola mafe, you're a college student, and you're not gay, you're not part of the gay community whatsoever, but you're fighting on behalf of trans people. Maybe because you have a friend or two that are trans. Ay, Wacko. One sec, guy. Wacko, come here. Sorry, I live in the jungle, so as you can see, sometimes the dogs go crazy, and there are lots of different things that happen over here. But do you get what
Especially
I'm
your
talking
dog.
about?
Yeah. Well, it
Yeah.
makes me think of the trope, I guess, say what you want about him, but and he's not the first to say this. I was thinking this when I was, I don't know, 13 or something, but a lot of these people, they uh, they freak out about causes, things that are happening on the other side of the world, and they haven't cleaned their own room, kind of a thing. That trope, right? Or people who
Uh,
protest oil and they stand in the middle of the road blocking, regular working people from getting to their job, and it's not very effective because they cause a lot of backlash, you know? And that's because they're ignoring their local issues, the fact that people have to scrape by to make a living, be stuck in traffic and all that. Those might seem completely irrelevant, but those things are stopping the average person from joining your Save the Whale cause or just stop oil. You see what I mean? It's counterproductive if you can't if you're looking too far away. It's like if you're thinking about achieving something and you think about everything, every step that you need to get there, it's going to feel like a mountain and you're just going to destroy your own motivation as opposed to looking at what's locally around you, what you can actually do in your sphere of influence. That's a big theme for me. Identifying your actual sphere of influence and addressing that because yeah, again, if you're focusing outside of that, you have no power over there. And like that's kind of something that I've noticed is that people who focus always on geopolitics, and I'm not saying that it's not important to follow that to some degree, but when it's very imbalanced and it's
yeah.
just that, then they're coming from a place of they're almost trying to validate their sense of powerlessness on some level. And it might even play into a narrative of I'm the little guy fighting the overwhelming force. And you know what? That creates a narrative of I'm the hero, I'm virtuous because I'm also a victim. That's part of it too. That, in a sense, is a purpose, right?
Yeah, that's like a cool paradox. I don't know what we could call it, but it's you're making yourself the hero by making yourself the victim. So you're the victim becoming
No,
the hero kind of thing.
no. The
I like
underdog.
that, because you're not a victim to begin with. And yeah, and it's easy to become the hero when you place yourself in the victim role and then you overcome that victim role so that it looks like you're a hero. But you're not a hero. I mean, it's not like, for example, your 15-year-old in third world Africa who is, fighting against all odds for an education, walking two,
No,
3 hours to get to school, and, all that stuff, studying at candlelight in a mud hut at night, and then making it to university in Europe and having a successful career, going on to, I don't know, maybe invent some kind of new solar panel. There are lots of cases like that. That to me is a hero. And we can perceive that person as a victim was a victim of the economy, was a victim of their position in life, where they were born, the lack of privilege, whatever it is, and they became the hero because they transcended all those things. But who's to say that there's a necessity for the victim hero archetype? I know that we run on archetypes, is a big part of our psyches, and at the very least, if you think of yourself as a hero, you'll more than likely become a hero and be able to succeed. So I'm not saying that anything wrong with the archetypes. I'm just saying that you can hack that in a way that is very, very counterproductive to your own life, as well as it's just a horrible thing, culturally speaking, in a society to run amok, which is to like pretend that you're the victim and then become the hero. Because there's no struggle there. I mean, there's no true struggle, But and then people I think would kind of jump in and say, well, yeah, there are these things, and you do have power, and if enough people wake up and it's true, there is a certain amount of activism that I think is necessary, but we have to be
Yes.
very careful what that activism is. And I mean, everybody is protesting for wars that are not relevant to them at all. Now, the problem is global war is relevant to everybody on the planet now if it
More and more
means
so.
nuclear war, or
Yeah.
it's relevant if their governments are giving a lot of your tax dollars away because that's directly linked to you as the taxpayer. So, I mean, yeah, by all means, there's activism that you should do because it actually impacts you, but you can't go and be an activist for all these different causes that are not relevant to you. I mean, we just don't have the bandwidth of empathy or time or ability to do it.
Well, okay.
I'm sure
Let
that
me
if I
get
was in a certain position where, sorry, go ahead.
right. Let me go out on a limb and just come up with a hypothetical example of this that maybe the global problems are actually an accumulation of local problems that aren't being addressed because we're constantly facing the global problem, right? Like maybe your government
Mm,
is engaging in war because that government has run amok because your people haven't really held them accountable, I guess, right? And the way that you hold them accountable is by building local power. I don't know, like self sufficient systems where you're not dependent on these centralized forces. You get what I'm saying? It's the sum total, and we get distracted by the big picture, but the big picture is made up of many little pictures. And that's where we all have power. And when we're talking about that victim slash hero dichotomy, yes, there's a contradiction there. But once you resolve the paradox of it, you understand okay, being a hero is about seeing how big and how small you are at the same time. There's a meeting point is where is your sphere of influence? Where do you actually have power? Like the African student who walks 2, 3 hours a day to go to school. That is within their power to do that, to go to school. So eventually that they can grow their sphere of influence and have more of a positive effect. But for now, they focus on what they can do. That's being the hero in a balanced way while also acknowledging how limited you are, right?
yeah, absolutely. I like that idea. Is you've sort of you've not made it here nor there. It's about
Yeah.
acting, but on the in the local level, so that you're actually having an impact on the global level. If all the local levels across the planet are really having activism because it's relevant to them, they're changing their immediate environments. That also changes the global landscape. I like that a lot, but so far, I'm trying to understand how that fits in to purpose, because we
Right.
understand that on the individual level, you're losing your sense of purpose because you're being hijacked by these global causes, right? But there are such a thing as purposes for larger scales, right? In terms of
Mhm.
communities, nations, So who gets to dictate what the purpose of a nation, for example, is the question, right?
Right.
Like you what I'm trying to be is not hip. I don't want to be hypocritical, or ignore the fact that the individual still takes part in a society, and that you're not just an individual alone. Although I'm quite individualist in a lot of ways about it. that individual is still a very social animal. So we do have a say as to how we guide or choose the purpose of our culture, for example, to be. Like in the America, it's like freedom is the culture, right? Everyone is free. And in Europe, from what I've learned living there, they're all about they seem to be all about fighting for freedom because they're not free. And in the States, like they're free, but they're fighting to stay free. But everybody's always fighting to be free instead of actually just enjoying their freedoms, right?
Yeah.
And that's what's
Yeah.
cool about coming to there's always going to be some level of constraint, right? I don't want to get down the philosophical rabbit hole of what freedom means here, not yet. But the point is like if you ignore the fact that there is a nation, that there is a community that has a lot like laws in place to govern how your individual life is going to play out a lot of the time, you do need to be concerned with these larger causes and you have to be aware of what you want to do to move the purpose of your soul, of your culture and of your society in a direction that really aligns with the benefit of you, not as an individual with your personal like desires, right? But you as an individual in the sense that this benefits all individuals, right?
Mhm.
That's what I think the Western world was predicated upon. That you make the individual, you maximize the opportunities and freedoms of the individual, and then emerges a better society because individuals tend to revolve around wanting to participate in society and help and be useful and have community. So you don't need to socially engineer community, which is why I think the major revolutionary cultures and political systems in the last 100 years have always been these freedom for the individual based cultures, and those others that are focused on community first, they tend to be the super tyrannical ones, right? So
Right.
so there is purpose. You do need to think about the purpose of your society is what I'm trying to say. And so how do you change because right now the purpose of the states is just consumption. I mean, it's the political and economic system is just consumption. It's and I would say in the Western world, that's what the purpose has been hijacked. Before it was like freedom so that people could live their lives and generate an economy that could sustain everybody and it worked. But then we lost our values and now it's just corruption, consumption, and consumerism. So we need to change that culture. How do you do it? How do you do it without, like, for example, if I'm an artist, it lends itself well to try to change the culture because I can make art, which is something I like to do, and that's my purpose anyway. But I can make art that helps shift the culture in the direction that I like. But if I'm a baker, right, and that's my purpose, and I have a family and everything, how do you how do you align your purpose as a baker or as an individual with that higher purpose of what you want your society to reflect your values? And you can get lost in that so easily. And to me, the only answer has been go off and live somewhere where you're free to live the way you want to live. So I tend to, be more anarchist in that way. Not because I don't want to fight any political system. I don't want to taint my personal purpose and get in the way of my own life by having to fight some system or try to change the culture to reflect my needs and desires and you know what I mean? What
Hmm.
do you have like opinion on that?
Well, one thing that stood out when I read your intro to your book on purpose, which was at one point you mentioned how to some people purpose anything else than you know the first word that comes to mind is carnal purpose or like very, very mundane survival based purpose. Drink a glass of water because you're thirsty. Do something because it's pleasurable or it avoids discomfort. Some people don't believe in anything more than that. And that's a choice. There's an aspect to purpose that I find interesting from that perspective is that it's kind of like a pick your own story. You get what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
you don't want to fight a political system. Some people do. Some people want to be the hero in their narrative. Some people see the purpose in that. They see that as being valuable because it has an effect on many people's lives. But to other people, that is not directly valuable because where they see purpose, where they see meaning, it might be in personal pleasure, but or it could be in creating something positive that isn't fighting a political system. Build it and they will come. That's a whole other aspect, a whole other, in my opinion, perfectly valid strategy. And in French, there's this expression, prend toutes sortes de monde pour faire le monde. It takes all, because the word people and world are the same in French, monde. So it takes all kinds of people to make the world. It's more ironic in the language, but essentially, it kind of like everything balances out. This world is a buffet of experiences down to even what purpose means to every individual, and there's beautiful diversity in that.
Okay, that's where I'm going to interject. So I like the fact that you're playing not devil's advocate because I don't think that you're necessarily in my corner, and I'm not trying to establish my worldview. And like you
Yeah,
said, I
yeah,
I prefer to go off and build it so that people will come versus others who like to directly have impact. So I'm on the objective train as well. My goal, especially with this Purpose X project, is to help people discover their purposes. If they want to go out there and
yeah.
and be activists, that's fine. I just want to point out the the big risk with activism, and this is where I want to interject because of what you were saying. Is it true that you can actually have an impact in the world? And is it true that you will be
Sure.
happier with that impact in the world? And is it true that you even know what kind of impact you're having in the, there's this term which is useful idiot. So there's a bunch of corporations and political agents, let's say, who love to polarize and harness the energy of young, naive students because they have the energy and they're not quite mature enough to understand that what they're fighting for really is either irrelevant or disconnected from their own interests or whatever it is. So they use them as useful idiots. So they're like, yeah, these are great. They're fighting for us and for our cause, but they don't realize that they're fighting for our cause. If they really knew what they were doing was actually against their own interests, they wouldn't really, but they don't know and they don't care to know because they're just thriving on the rush of feeling this meaningful journey of like protesting, right? So I feel like I don't think that it's the case today that activism really is changing things and changing things for the better. Most people don't know what they're protesting for, if it's even true. Like they just don't know. They don't research the very things that they supposedly care about, and
Or the
and I think
opposing
that
views. They don't even
that would
know
be the
anything about
or the
alternative
opposing views.
perspectives. Yeah, yeah, a lot of the time. Yeah,
Exactly. It's just the climate that we're in right now, man, and that's what I think we have
yeah,
to be very careful of.
yeah, I agree. Well, this kind of comes back to the first point you made, which is the purpose of purpose. So I have I'm always a person who tends to juggle a few different ideas at once. I don't tend to marry just one perspective. I can and I have, but when it comes to this stuff, I'd say one of the major perspectives that I keep coming back to is one thing I've always felt is that everyone is trying to do their best and we all want what is best. But that can mean very different things to different people. Some people don't believe in good or bad, so there is no best. And that's what they believe to be true. And so, what is best in their perspective is to not really do anything at all, or just do what is pleasurable, or just avoid discomfort, right? For me, it's always been I don't know ultimately. But if there is a best out there, chances are one of the best things I can possibly do is constantly refine and question my own idea of what is best. It's refining the purpose of purpose. It's making one of the central meanings of my life being to find meaning. It it's recursive, but it's been very rewarding for me.
Yeah, but I would say that you're in a different category, and I think it's one that exists. I think we all seek meaning, But the way you've just described it is you're seeking meaning by refining purpose, and that's a very meta level. Like
Sure.
it's like metacognition. It's a metacognitive behavior, and so it's not everybody that lives in abstractions like you and I do, right? I think most people seek for meaning just as much as we do, but they seek it in the satisfaction that they get, purely on the experiences that they have. If they try something and they really
Yeah.
like it, they feel that it's meaningful, they go for that. And if they don't feel it's meaningful anymore, they'll look for other things that they respond to and they'll chase that. But I doubt that a lot of people find meaning in actually refining their purpose. I don't think people try to refine their purposes very much. They tend to do it when they hit like a midlife crisis or the successfully empty, as I call them, which is a large part of the people that I target with this Purpose X project, is people who are already successful and yet they don't feel there's any meaning in their success.
Mhm.
The purpose hasn't really generated the meaning that they thought it would. So I just want to put that out there before you either say or people tend to think that what you're saying means that that some people don't look for meaning. I think people do. They're just not as conscious as to whether their purpose really serves their meaning or not. Right? Like I wanted to be an
Yes.
actor before I loved that, but it really didn't bring me as much meaning as I thought it would, and I had to accept that.
And to ground what I was saying, because yeah, what you made a good point that I'm getting kind of meta in what I'm explaining, but there is a way to connect it to most people, which is just realizing that engaging with questioning whatever purpose you've attached to may have more value than you realize. And that can apply to activism. It can apply to the arts, like you were saying. It's at a certain point, if you try a bunch of things and you don't get the sense of meaning that you thought you did, or it doesn't last, which is probably the most common thing, right? Is because you might get a hit out of it, but then as you experience it for longer, you see the ups and the downs, and it kind of loses its shine. But actually inspecting what it is that motivated you to do that in the first place, was it just fleeting feelings? Because if that's the case, then that's what's motivating you. That's just going to spread you thin. You're going to get attracted to one thing and then another, right? And there are other ways to derive meaning. Some people it's something that is built over a long period of time, and that's kind of hard to tap into. I think nowadays a lot of people are lacking that because again, they just rush to one thing or the other and they attach themselves to for me, music for a long time. I would get a shot from it. You know, maybe I'd play guitar, I'd come up with something new, or I'd listen to a song that was really inspiring for me. And then I would start applying myself and I would realize how tough it really is, right? And it wasn't as shiny anymore. But that's a very shallow uh, experience. That's a very shallow experience of meaning, of purpose. It's just feeling as opposed to something that you
No,
can build over the long term.
yeah, I
Go
wouldn't
ahead.
say it's a shallow experience of meaning. I don't think it's meaningful at all. I think what you were
Right.
saying at the very beginning
Yeah.
there of your thought is more accurate, which is it's a fleeting feeling, which basically means that people are conflating feelings with meaning. Now,
Hmm.
meaning can cause a lot of good feelings, right? Like when something
Yes.
is meaningful, you feel good, you feel some sense of fulfillment and satisfaction. You can feel proud, right? But when, for example, you're enjoying music, you're enjoying the rush of playing, you know, up on stage in a bar somewhere, and you're getting compliments, you're connecting with the community, you're having a good time. That good time, it could be meaningful to you, absolutely.
Sure.
But some people, like, that's all that they're doing. They're trying to chase that rush. And when you're chasing that rush, that dopamine hit, yeah, it's almost like it's a fuzzy area. Like, how do you define meaning? Is it something that is fleeting or is it something that is long
Yeah.
term? I think that something that is meaningful touches some level of sense of fulfillment versus just satisfies some kind of lower function like fun, joy.
Mhm.
Yeah, you can do something that makes you happy, but it doesn't necessarily make your life meaningful. I think meaningful is a longer lasting. more general. Like
Yep.
I feel like meaning, once you've attained it, you could be sitting there on the train, waiting 4 hours, bored out of your skull, but your life, you feel like your life is meaningful, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So
And
to me, that's
yeah,
that's just we have to make sure we don't conflate like feelings with meaning
well,
necessarily.
it gets a little bit difficult. It's good that you point that out because I guess when I say shallow, it sounds kind of I don't know, accusatory or saying that it's a bad thing. But it's more that it's just a very small part of
No,
something
just
bigger.
I was just trying to.
Right.
I'm very sorry. It'll be the last time I cut you off. But
No
I'm just trying
worries.
to point out, like, how meaningful is it if it's shallow? It's a bad
Hmm.
contradiction, is what I'm saying.
Right.
Can it be meaningful if it's shallow? So shallow meaning doesn't make sense to me.
Right. Well,
Like I almost feel as if though there is no meaning that is like a little bit of meaning. I think that meaningful is profound. It's always a profound
mhm,
experience. Even if it's small, even if it only generates like you can do something that is meaningful, like you give some money to a poor person in the street and it feels meaningful that you've helped them. But that is, again, it's meaningful maybe towards your building of virtues. And it's really the
yes.
fact that you're building your virtues, generosity in this case, that is meaningful. And that's longer lasting. The hit that you're getting in the moment for seeing him smile at you and say thank you, that's just a feeling. That's not the meaningful part. The meaningful part is the fact that you know that you're working on your virtues.
Well, here's a way to put it because sort of the way that we frame the conversation this far is activism bad, and that's I if someone's actually been listening to this, I'm sure that they get that that's not really what we're saying.
Mhm.
But to give some depth to that, even if you have someone who is fighting for a cause that isn't effective or isn't legitimate or is contrived, perhaps by political forces, they just convince people to fight for something, but it's actually for this other secretive cause or whatever. Someone doing that, being misguided, that can be meaningful because their intention goes deeper than just the cause itself. And they might learn from the experience that, hey, okay, this specific cause is missing this and that, or it's contrived in certain ways, and that helps that person learn to find greater causes. Then they start looking in other places or finding the aspects of that cause that really do matter or are correct, the solutions that are valid, and separating the cutting the what is the expression? Cutting the chaff, cutting the fat, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, separating the chaff or wheat from the chaff.
Right.
It
Yes.
does, and I think it's now we can move it into that's a good segue into identity because I think that there are people who it really is their identity for one reason or another that it's a good career for them to be political activists and to get into
Mhm.
politics maybe from the side of media. You get all these people who are pundits, I guess is what they call them. If I'm using that term correctly, I'm not sure, but political pundits or people who are analysts or journalists, people who just, go out there and try to not fight, but expose the other political opponents, failings and be proponents of their own political ideologies to try to change the culture. That is their career. That's what they're good at. It's what's meaningful to them. I feel like that's completely okay. But if it's not, but a lot of people get just drafted into, they just get sucked into this activism thing and they become political agents and they've never really actually discovered their own desires, their own needs, their own personalities in a way that can allow them to orient themselves towards a purpose that is in actuality the right purpose for them. It's not everybody that wants to live their entire lives as activists, but nowadays so many people have so much time on their hands, and we've run to the end of our ability to live so hedonistically. People aren't happy with TV, Netflix, binging, alcohol. gratuitous sex, food, and travel, and more and more consumerism, gadgets. That just people aren't happy with that. So naturally, they start to gravitate towards activism. But just because you're not happy with your life doesn't necessarily mean that
Yeah.
your life is going to be meaningful because you've taken up a cause that has nothing to do with your life. You're doing the exact opposite of what you should do, which is to discover your identity. And how are you going to
Agree.
do that is the question. And that's what's going to lead you to higher purpose, right?
Well, would you say that one way that someone could relate to the concept of identity is to recognize their sphere of influence and what attitude or how they approach that, how they interact with that sphere of influence. It's who you actually are, where you are, what you can actually do, and how you're going to approach all of that. What do you think of that?
I think you're right. I think that it also would be a good, valid reason for why people are drawn towards politics, because politics is like the pragmatic end of your values being employed in the society around you. So you need to figure out what your values are before you can actually move forward in your identity and in the activities of the purpose you're going to choose for yourself, right? So I can see that as being correct. So, okay, there is a level of political exploration that is relevant to your identity. Absolutely. Again, because you need to figure out what your values are. So if you debate other people about abortion, for example, and you know where you stand on abortion or on taxes or whatever it is. And so then it will help you narrow down who you are, what kind of community you want to live in, and maybe perhaps what kind of career you want to do. I don't think that it's necessarily a coincidence that blue collar people who do blue collar jobs tend to have the same values. I think there are different reasons for it, but one of them is just the pure and simple fact that if you are someone who likes to work with their hands and be self-sufficient, like work on a farm or something like that, that you're naturally going to gravitate towards an anti-government stance or less government stance anyway, because you want to be able to stay self-sufficient. You don't need anybody coming to. So I think that values do correlate strongly with your identity, and that is figured out in the political sphere. That's as much as I'm gonna give you there, but you have to be very careful again, that you're doing it with the intention of discovering who you are to move forward in your purpose in life, not having no awareness whatsoever that you're just part of this movement that you don't even realize you're spending time, effort, and energy uh, at the cost of your self discovery. Because most people don't say, "I want to fight for this because this is who I am." They want to fight for this because they want to feel good, because they want to feel like they're part of something. But it's not really them, and it's not what they should be a part of. Right? That's that subtlety there.
Well, I mean, like in the health world, I do work. I do consultations for people's health, hair tissue mineral analysis, that kind of stuff. And often I get people who want to argue certain points with me, and that's fine. But an example I had recently was someone who said they're using a certain product, which I felt wasn't the best. It's not really supported by the research and based on personal experience working with people, it may have some pretty big downsides. And they decided to quote some doctor, some respected doctor in Turkey about this product, and they were saying, "Oh, they say all these good things about it," and I just simply had to say like, "Well, a lot of experts have differing opinions on this kind of a thing, right?" So activism, in a lot of cases, not all cases, it is kind of deferring authority to whoever is telling you this cause is important. It's presented to you packaged very nicely. It's the same as buying ramen noodles as opposed to growing your own food and seeing what's actually involved with that and how much needs to go into it.
Hmm.
You you see what I'm getting at, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I like the analogy. It's it's a good one.
Well, I think
Yeah.
it's all connected personally.
Let me think about that.
Uh,
Yeah. I mean, I really like that you're bringing nuance to this and you're resisting me because I understand and I am aware of just how entrenched I am in my own worldview and my own sentiment based on the experiences that I've had. And maybe I could share just to be candid here and a bit more personalized. But like while I was living in Germany, I saw some parents with like a 3 or 4 year old, and they had made a little sign for the 4 year old to and they were all as a fan like it's kind of like the norm, it's a normal thing there in Germany from what I've learned. Could be wrong, but that's what people were telling me anyway. That you just go as a family. You protest as a family. It's part of their culture,
Mm.
and to me, that's wrong. I feel like that's you're indoctrinating. Obviously, parents want to pass down their values to their kids, and they're gonna have to because, you know. But I think that you can do that at certain times. You're not gonna teach your 4 year old about anal sex, right? And it's self-evident why you're not gonna do that. I mean, it should be. It's not so much nowadays, unfortunately, but, you know, you're I think that politics is reserved for people it's relevant to. As a 4 year old, you should go around and play. I don't think that, bringing a child to a political demonstration is I think it's not it's my value that I think I wouldn't want my kids involved in politics that young. And so people may not share that value with me, but the point is that's just one of the examples of the experiences that I've had that have shaped my values. And now if I have a client who says, "Yeah, that's perfectly normal. I think it's a good thing." I don't want them to get this sense that I was trying to push them in one direction or another. That's not what I want to do here when I help people find their purpose. I'm not going to try to help them find their purpose, but only within the scope of what I feel is good. That to me is indoctrination and ideological subversion, and it goes against my values. So if someone sits there and tells me, "Yeah, this is what I want to do, and that's my purpose," I'm not going to be like, "Yeah, that's not a good purpose. Thumbs down,
Yep.
and you should move in this direction." That's not at all what I want to do. So I like the fact that you can resist me and that you do so that we can show. And I also try. I don't know if I've tried hard enough here so far, but I also try to like mangoes still falling.
Nice.
I try to be objective and to show the nuance of things. But how far do I go? Like, what do you think? Like, how far do I go with that? Because let's say I'm going to use an extreme example to make it obvious. Let's say someone's purpose they discover is murder. Like they want to go and kill.
Mm, yeah.
And I don't mean like join the military and kill other people. I mean like illegally do it for the pleasure, go out and murder, right?
Yeah.
I can't be a proponent. I can't be like, yeah, make that your purpose. It's all good, bro. Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So there is a limit there. Like how far do I go and step over my own values to help someone discover their purpose?
Right.
Do you have any ideas about that?
Well, like a theme that it makes me think of right away that I come back to again and again is that people tend to see life as either black or white or all gray tones, grayscale, right? But I think what's more accurate is that there's black and white at extreme ends, and then there's gray in between, right? So depending on where you want to stand, and you have to define those values for yourself, right? I can't be coming in like based on everything that we've touched on and the approach that you just described. I can't come in here and tell you, okay, what are the exact morals, the exact lines where you have to draw a line or not, right? But I can encourage you to see things a certain way where you can start to define those lines for yourself. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. Like,
Yeah, I like that. I've always believed that too, that there is both black and white and the grayscale in between. I think that I'm going to push you a bit further on this. Can you clarify more? Like, in my shoes, what would you do so that you
mhm,
can figure out that, like, maybe the two are maybe it's a non-issue. Like maybe for me, helping someone discover their purpose has nothing to do with having an opinion as to what the purpose is. It has more to do with the infrastructure to help them like discover what it is. So if I'm really involved in just the discovery process of their purpose, it's not for me to judge what that purpose is after the fact, right? I can still have a stance, but I don't know how relevant it's going to be throughout the development of my work here to begin with.
Well, again, I think it's a matter of thinking about it ahead of time, trying to think of as many scenarios as possible. Like, okay, what if you actually did work with a client who everything in their way of thinking and how they feel about things and their stance with their community, with the world around them, it just keeps coming back to murder. Well, I mean, I think you can say for yourself, well, you're going to stop working with them, right? But then you need to
Yeah,
think of
well, I'm not going to
actual,
work with criminals.
yes. Well, there you go. There's a clear line.
Yeah, I think like if I'm going to help someone, do something that harms others, then no. But beyond those hard lines, there are certain hard lines that are very easy to define. But I'm talking about like
Yeah.
past that, like activism, right? If I think that activism, and I can see it in the person, right? Like this person's, their identity is fragmented. They're still just sort of drunk the Kool-Aid and they're involved in this political movement and it's almost like a cult. I It's against my values, sure, but again, because I don't think that activism is necessarily bad, that it might be who they really are, that it's not for me to say that or to even let them know what my position is. It's just
Mm.
my position is just to be there to help them discover, is that really your purpose? And how do you know whether that is your purpose or not? How receptive are you to meaning and things like that? Have you discovered a
Yeah.
worldview and are you solid about your worldview inside and out? Do you know about it to really feel like it's a foundational structure that proves that you're in the right direction with your purpose? Some people they feel like, man, I haven't been able to achieve any success in this purpose, but I really love what I do, and I don't know if it's my purpose anymore. Well, that kind of problem, I want to be able to solve. The actual
Mhm.
purpose itself, I think, might not be an issue whatsoever. But I think yeah, maybe the metric should be if the person is going down a lot of mental health issues and they're feeling a loss, like nihilism and things like that, that's a sign that what they're pursuing is not really well aligned with who they are.
Mhm.
That's as best as I can go down because I can't, again, one, I don't want to, and I will not ideologically subvert anybody to accept my own worldview, but I also don't want to play the mental health psychologist. I mean, there is some level of that involved. I feel like, as an acting teacher in the past, I realized a lot of my work is very therapeutic. A lot of my students were there
Yeah.
not for fun, they were there to like excise some kind of emotion that they had blocked in their lives, right? So there was some sort of like mental health kind of practice. So I have become a bit of a psychologist in a way. I don't claim to be a therapist, I don't claim to do any of that stuff, but I feel like there is a bit of a role uh, or it's part of the role of purpose is to figure out your own psyche. And I'm not a mental health professional, I just feel like it's like Viktor Frankl. If you can derive meaning out of your life, then it tends to work out a lot of the neuroses that you have. A lot of the mental health issues, depression, things like that, they're stemming from the fact that you don't actually have any meaning in your life. And the only
Mhm.
way to have meaning is to select and discover your purpose. So I'm not going to say that there's no psychological component. There is, but these are the kinds of lines that I need to figure out. Like, how much do I treat the person's psychological state versus just give them tools to really move forward? Like, here's the tasks, here's what you need to untangle.
Yeah.
And one of those tasks could be, yeah, you need to see a therapist to manage or mitigate your depression, for example.
Yeah. Well, that's very case by case, and it gets tough because, like in the example that you're giving, uh, someone who maybe has been doing something for a certain period of time, and they derive intellectual meaning from it, but they feel, they're feeling nihilistic, or they have a very nihilistic outlook. Sometimes, just in my experience, is that often they're not like admitting something about it. Like they have certain concepts about what it is that they're doing, or motivations that they're not admitting. Like we've mentioned before, maybe they're getting a hit out of being part of a community, and their community telling them, "Oh, you're a good person because you're doing this." Right? That's something that a lot of people don't want to face up to. They will lie to themselves and tell themselves, "No, I care about this." And maybe they do, but maybe also a lot of the motivation as well is coming from the validation, or the narrative of being a hero or something like that. Or, like, I can admit for a long time when I was involved in music, a lot of it was ego. Like, I wanted to be recognized for it. And I had to let it go because that was draining me in many areas of my life. And now I have a much healthier relationship to music. I really do it for myself. And you know what? If there's a little bit of ego in there, that's fine. But it's just you have to understand how much energy you're putting into something and why. Right. And that
That's
only
true.
answers your
That is
question
true.
for certain people, for parts of people, because there's other cases too. There's other ways that this can play out. But that I see as being a pretty major thing, and it's really hard to face, and especially working with someone else, even if it's someone that you isn't close to you, like someone like you who they found online, let's say, and not through like more grassroots means, like through a friend or something. Even then, it can be well, as I was saying, it's hard to admit to yourself. So even to talk to someone else and admit it, yeah, that is hard.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I may just be concerned with something that I shouldn't be too concerned about because, again, if I'm focused on just helping people untangle themselves from, I think I can do it in an objective fashion and not really address whether what they're doing is good or bad. It's not binary like that. It's more so like, is it truly meaningful to you or not? And have you convinced yourself that it is when it isn't? Right? Like you were saying,
Mhm.
someone might actually care about the activism that they're doing. Yeah, and caring doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing, or that it's not true, that it's part of who you are. But is it really good for you? There are plenty of things that I care about that I can't pour my energy or my identity into because it's not for me and it's not good for me. Just
Mhm.
like you said, if your attachment to music was from some egotistic angle and you had a bad relationship with it, then it wasn't for you, at least not in the capacity or in the fashion that you were pursuing it. So you have
Yeah.
aligned, excuse me,
Bless you.
excuse me. So you've aligned yourself with music. Thank you. You've aligned yourself with music in a healthier fashion. So you didn't let it go necessarily, right? But
Yeah.
you've aligned yourself in a more purposeful, like the purpose of music for you now is to satisfy your creativity, for example, versus being recognized. That shift doesn't mean that you stop music. It just means that you stop doing it for the wrong reasons and you stop doing music in certain contexts. You've changed the context. You're still doing music. So that's what's cool about, I think, what I'm going to be doing and what you're going to be doing is helping people shift and align, not necessarily change,
Mm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because most of the time, people are gravitating towards what they love to do anyway. They already know what area they're in and want to be in. It's just they don't know why they're not able to extract meaning from it. And it's because they don't have an alignment in that way. But then there are other people where it's different. They literally just have either grown out of their passion. They've done it for 10, 15 years. They're tired of it. They want to move on. They want to grow because that's their personality. And then there are others still that they get booted out of their purpose, right? There's no more AI software engineers anymore. Don't need that. And that's really what those people love to do. They were super happy doing it. Now they have to reinvent themselves. So
Mm.
there are different case scenarios here that we have to take into account.
Yeah. No, exactly. Something I mentioned is that there's a lot of variety in terms of his purpose, again, is very general. So it's going to manifest very differently in different people and their relationship to purpose or whatever their purpose is. And it's kind of beautiful that way because as you said, like for certain people, their relationship with purpose is going to challenge your purpose. And it doesn't have to be necessarily, a criminal, but it can be something related to activism, right? And so, like, I think when we approach concepts like this, we see it from our own perspective, and it's very hard to relate to it and how other people relate to it. But if we want to be able to discuss these fundamental things, we have to be able to look at it from multiple angles.
That's a good point. I like that. And I like how this topic of activism has really been a good scaffold for understanding like our relationship as purpose coaches, if you want to put it that way, to the clients that we have. Yeah. It's really pulled together a lot of these cool things and I'm really grateful for it. Is there anything else you want to bring up or in regards to this?
Uh, well,
This is a good place to end it.
I'll just say it's kind of what I just said before, but part of the process of working with someone else on their purpose is aligning our own purpose with that. And so it's kind of like the work is being done on both sides, which is a little bit self-serving on our end. We benefit from that too in a lot of ways, and it can challenge us too. And that can actually be scary to some people as well. But that's the only way to really move forward. Just the same way as me admitting that ego was a certain motivation for music, we have to be willing to face that kind of I don't really like this word, it gets used too much, but vulnerability, right? And so you need other people to be able to face vulnerable issues with you, and they're willing to do that in themselves at the same time. Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
my final
And
point.
that's what I like about I like that you bring it up because it's a good way to end it. And if I can recap it, I would say that the value of what you just described is this. There there aren't very many adequate places or people you can go to help yourself align yourself to your
Mhm,
purpose. You could go talk to a friend and just, talk about it and they can listen, which is helpful. But that friend isn't necessarily going to help you understand purpose, what it is, meaning, how you align yourself. It's an absolute purpose and things like that. When you're in an existential crisis, it's not just your personal purpose, it's your entire framework for reality. It's why am I around to fulfill this purpose to begin with? And I'm not so sure I believe in God anymore or atheism isn't enough for me anymore, right? I've heard both cases. So there's people who can go to psychologists, they can go to their spiritual authority, they can go to these different things, but there's always a context around which the purpose of those places and those people don't really help you at the end, right? If you go see your spiritual advisor, they're going to help you, but in the context of your faith and your religion. It's not really in the context of you as an individual with your purpose, right? Because there are biases. Your priests might say, look, God is trying to tell you this or that, but it's the assumption that God, as they believe it, could be Christ, could be, Allah, anybody. So it's like they're not going to give you that space necessarily to be like, maybe you should investigate other religions, right?
mhm. Yeah,
Or your
right.
metaphysical assumptions, you should investigate them in a logical fashion. And a psychologist will be like, okay, I can help you with the depression and the stress of you losing your job and feeling existential crisis. But at the end of the day, I'm not your career counselor and I'm not a philosopher here, I'm here to help you with your mental health issues. And then you could go to a philosopher, but philosophers don't really do that. And you can read the books, the philosophy books and stuff, but how much time are you truly going to dedicate towards reading all the philosophies to try to understand how to align your purpose, right? So
Yeah.
I feel like there aren't any adequate places to go to really just have what you need in this. And it's crazy because circling back to the very beginning of what we were saying with the obviousness paradox, is that purpose, it's so obvious that we move with purpose in the world to have meaning in our lives, but it's so obvious that we don't pay much attention to it. And
Mhm.
that's the paradox, because you need to pay attention the most to your purpose and whether you're aligned with it and if it's truly meaningful to you or not, right? And and there's no place, there's no scaffold for that. There's no, and this is why I think this is necessary, this kind of service, this kind of thing that we're providing to people. So absolutely, man. That's been a pleasure. Let's cap it off with that.
All right.
And
There's a lot
we
more to
should have
say.
more of
I'm
these
I'm
discussions.
coming up with stuff now, but we'll leave it for now. I need to write it down.
Well, yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, write it down.
Yeah.
Can you just off the top of your head shoot them off so people can like tune in later
Sure.
and listen to that?
Well, I mean, first thing, this doesn't apply to everyone, but one thing that is worth keeping in mind is that you don't necessarily need a ultimate meaning or purpose right away. It can be something like, well, like we mentioned, your purpose could be to find purpose in life for a certain period of time. It could be to take care of your health so that once a greater purpose comes, you're better equipped, or take care of your finances. That can be a small purpose leading to larger purposes. There are things that will prepare you for more opportunity or more crisis in your life later on, right? And it's really helpful to
Mm,
break things down into baby steps sometimes. This kind of relates to what I said earlier about looking at a mountain as opposed to each step that's in front of you. And of course, that brings in the question of faith, having the faith that that smaller purpose even pays off to some larger purpose, but we'll get into that another time. But for a lot
yeah.
of people, that
So
can be really
okay,
helpful.
maybe next episode will be, yeah, I think that's brilliant. The next episode we can discuss relative versus absolute purpose.
Yes. Yeah,
That could be a good one.
definitely.
And also we should deliberate as to like what are the ideas. I want to kind of investigate and interview you about what ideas you have to build a framework to help people through purpose and meaning. Like you just had this idea that there are small things you can do in the meantime. I think I really like that. So how could we formalize that a little bit? Because this is going to be not just a 3-day event that I want to create. I want us to host an evergreen program, so it's an ongoing community. A month, people are weekly calls, and we get together and discuss things, as well as like one-on-one personal transformation, like intense coaching. Either way, we want to build more and more tools and discover through our client
Mhm.
interactions, like what are the best tools and avenues to help people align themselves with purpose. So let's 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 leave it at that. Relative versus absolute purpose and the frameworks that we use that we can develop in order to help people in this way. So anybody who's listened so far, thanks, and we'll see you soon.